Hey there, writers. We are back, and today we are going to be answering some of Reddit's r/writing questions. So I thought this might be a fun little way to shake things up, still keep on brand, but also kind of answer a few questions that it seems like people are having. So let's jump right into it. Our first question is, are main character names from popular novels off limits if you're writing in the same genre? So I thought this question was actually pretty interesting. So you guys can see it. I'll put it up somewhere on either side of me. But essentially, OP, original poster, is talking about the name Christian for a love story, which has obvious ties with, another popular book franchise. And wants to know, are certain names claimed, so to speak? And there was a lot of good answers on this one. Essentially, what people were saying and what I agree with is that while names are not necessarily claimed by authors of popular franchises, there is a certain sort of claimedness that the fandom associates with it. So if you're writing a love story and you have, say, Christian Blue in your love story, people are going to make the obvious connections with them. Whether that's a positive thing for your book or a negative thing for your book is something that you can decide on your own. When you are doing that kind of thing, like I said, Christian Blue is kind of a dramatic example. And if you were to create a love story with certain themes with a character named Christian Blue, you might find yourself up for copyright. So our next one I thought was a little funny. I actually threw it in here just because it was funny. What do you recommend to increase my words per minute emergency? So this person apparently is desperately in need of completing several books, it sounds like, to get out of some serious gambling debt. And they're trying to increase their word count so that they can, produce writing, essentially, and try to get paid for it. So while the post itself, I think, is a bit of a troll account, we're not really sure. The consensus was mixed. I think it's a troll account, just trying to poke fun with people. But worked for me. I was entertained. But on the note of increasing your word count or your words per minute or what have you, there are several schools of thought about increasing your productivity. It's really a matter of figuring out what focuses you. Some people do better if they're on a time crunch. If it's, I only have 1 hour between, picking the kids up from school and starting dinner that I need to get work in, like hypothetically, your spouse has got the kids, nobody's going to die while you have that hour. And that's what makes them productive because they have no other choice. Some people do better doing a words, per hour or words per minute. I need this many words done. And that, I think, is more of a get something on the page so that you can edit it. That whole you can't edit a blank page sort of thinking. So it really is just about finding what works for you and what works for your lifestyle as well. And also, please don't gamble away all of your money. As a native Las Vegan, I'm begging you, don't gamble away your money. So this next one we have is, any advice for interesting dialogue? And I kind of love this question because I oftentimes find that my dialogue feels a little stagnant. Like I won't say I'm a purple proser. I don't, wax on poetic about, a crack in the wall for 3 pages. But I do really like my descriptiveness. I am a self-described rambler, but my dialogue tends to fall short because I'm so into the narration and I'm so into the descriptiveness that I sort of forget about the dialogue along the way on occasion. And I personally have found that one thing that helps me out is reading my passages aloud. If I feel like a scene just isn't really working, I will read it aloud and kind of let it flow like it would a conversation. Yes, it does sound like I'm talking to myself, and I have gotten extremely embarrassed when my husband has walked in on me on times like this. But it really does help you sort of hear how it would naturally sound and or how unnaturally it sounds when you write it. Sometimes you write something thinking it's natural, but then you say it out loud and you hear it and you're like, nobody really talks like that. Like, I need to adjust this up. And sometimes you'll find yourself, self-editing out loud as you go because what you're trying to say or what you're trying to read off a page is just, it feels unnatural coming out. And that's a good way to help self-edit along the way. So I would highly recommend, as embarrassing as it might be if someone walks in, I do recommend reading aloud your dialogue passages if you're worried that they're not strong enough. The next one we have is, it's just titled A Question for Authors/Writers of the Sub, but it basically is, how do you get the inspiration for your stories, your ideas, things like that? And obviously this is a very open-ended question. You know, no two people are exactly the same in how they find inspiration. I personally am a very character-driven writer, so a lot of times my stories are sort of tailored to a character that I want to write. And I have in the past gone through several different versions of a setting or a plot until I find one that fits the character that I want to write. And that is personally how I tend to write my stories. I am not willing to give up on the type of character, the type of person they are, the type of story that I want them to be in. It's just a matter of finding the right, maybe not the right, but the most entertaining setting for that character. The next one we have is, how do I write a depressed character without making them unbearable? And I was actually quite interested in this question and the answers that they were getting, because depression, much like a lot of human behavior, is not really a monolith of there's one behavior for being depressed. This person does cite their own experience and does specifically say, I wouldn't want to read a book about myself. People don't necessarily want to read. I know a common outer sign of depression is, exhaustion. And, as unfortunate as it sounds and as bad as it sounds, people don't really want to read page after page after page of your character, being exhausted on the couch. Like, it is a good way to show that they're depressed, but you do have to switch it up with other traits. And what a lot of comments that I was seeing on this thread was suggesting were that depression is not really, you hit rock bottom and then you just act like a depressed puddle of mud for the rest of your life until you crawl out of depression. Depression does have highs and lows, much like a lot of human behavior. I personally dealt with a very short bout of depression, thankfully. And I, quite frankly, just thought I was sick during a lot of it. It took a while for me to even realize that it wasn't just me, on the verge of getting sick, because a lot of my symptoms were presenting as just like, oh, I'm a little more tired because, I'm getting kind of fluish. And I think that that's an interesting point of view to take, is that not everybody presents the same, because during that time, I was acting happy. There were moments like I still loved life and appreciated life. I loved being around my animals. I was living in Texas at the time, and I can say with full confidence, watching cows in their fields never failed to just warm my heart and make me the happiest I've ever been. It's not all doom and gloom all the time, and I think if you are writing a depressed character, it is important to show that it's not a monolith, that it's not all doom and gloom all the time, and that, because different people who experience depression differently will be reading your book, hopefully, hypothetically, and if all of the books about depressed individuals are just the same thing over and over again, people aren't going to think that they are, legitimately depressed.
Which over 9 million Americans suffer from and is very treatable.
All right, so this one, the last one we have, and it is my favorite one, that's why I saved it for last. 2020, cancel culture and the future of writing. I love this. So, funnily enough, I actually wrote a blog post about cancel culture in the literary world, which I will link down in the description below in case anybody is curious about reading it. But essentially, so this person published a novel. They've taken a very long break. So they want to get back into writing, and they're unsure because they're worried that they're going to be called out on every single little detail. They know, 15 years ago, people used the words gay or retarded as insults, which are obviously very deeply inappropriate today. This person acknowledges that as well, that verbatim what they said. And, movies were made with non-disabled actors playing disabled characters. They mentioned that as well. And, there was a lot of ignorance that happened, 10, 15 years ago that was just acceptable. It was okay. When I was a 90s baby, and as a white individual, I never really thought about the fact that there were no minorities in media. I saw myself in media, and that was just how it was. And I fed into that idea of, oh, well, I'm sure they picked the best person for the role. That's their job. And it's not quite that simple. So with the idea of cancel culture, though, in the literary world, there is a subsect of, we'll say, critics that do very much enjoy tearing down authors. And they do so under the name of representation, inclusivity, all of those, everything that's kind of umbrellaed under that. They are very quick to point out when you have screwed up, which makes, I won't say newbie because this individual has published a book, but it does make newbie or returning authors hesitant to jump in with both feet, because who's to say that they're not going to try their best at making an inclusive, currently appropriate book and still get raked over the coals for it. To that I say, you should write it. You should put as much research into it as you can. You should try to make it as inclusive and real, quite frankly. And that's the thing that people kind of mix up, is nobody's asking you to just throw a token Black character in your story. They want a real melting pot of characters, and that does include non-white characters, it does include non-straight characters, and that's just, quite frankly, how the world is, and that's what people are asking for, to see the world in our writing. And if you do your best to do that, and you do still fall short, and you do still find yourself on the receiving end of a cancel culture firing squad, in my opinion, the best thing to do is to acknowledge your mistakes and just apologize for them. A lot of authors that I've seen get roasted, so to speak, for what they've done are authors who insist on fighting back, on doubling down that, well, I didn't know it was wrong, so it's fine. It's not fine, is the thing. You didn't know, and that's the reason why it was written like that, and that's the reason why it was maybe politically incorrect or insensitive to a group. But just because it's a reason doesn't make it an excuse. And I think that's what the audience, not necessarily cancel culture, because I think the cancel culture enthusiasts are a different subsect of the audiences they're trying to represent. The audiences that they're trying to represent just want realism. If you come out and you say, I didn't realize that I put in, the stereotypical sassy Black girl, I'm sorry. That wasn't my intent. I can see now how it came across like that, and I can see that I do have more learning to do in order to make an actual realistic melting pot of characters. And I think people will be surprised at how receptive the audience is to that. The cancel culture enthusiasts may not be quite as receptive to it, but the audiences, I think, will be willing to see more, because they want to see more of themselves in writing. And if being called out for incorrectly writing a group that you're not a part of, with me, if I'm not writing a white girl, I have to do research, and I am going to misstep, and I am fully willing to acknowledge those missteps and be like, you know what, I did the best I could, I fell short, I can do better next time, I will do better next time. And that's really all we can say as authors. So those were our Reddit questions for today. I hope you guys enjoyed them. If you have same opinions, differing opinions, if you want to rake my opinions over the coals, feel free to put comments down below. If you have your own writing questions as well, I would love to hear them. If you are struggling, or if you've just had a question kind of rolling around in your head and you'd like my opinion on it, I am more than happy to answer any questions you guys have. So feel free to comment below. Feel free to hit that bell and that subscribe button so you get notified when I post. And I will see you guys next time. Later, writers.